Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Airways, always prided himself on his empire in the skies. But today, he was about to see if his airline still held the same high standards he once envisioned. Despite his status, Ethan had decided to go undercover. No VP treatment, no bodyguards, just him in a simple economy seat among the everyday passengers. For months, he'd heard murmurs of declining service and a toxic work culture in his company. His executives assured him everything was fine, but Ethan knew better. So, he booked a random flight, using a fake name, to see for himself. As soon as he boarded, he felt the weight of the airline's issues. A tense conversation between two passengers caught his attention. Behind him, a young woman's anxious voice trembled in the air, barely above a whisper. She was clearly distraught. "I can't believe this is happening. I should have been there sooner." Sarah Calloway, a 26-year-old woman, murmured. She clutched her phone tightly, tears welling in her eyes. It was obvious she was running on fumes, both emotionally and financially, having barely scraped enough money together to book this last-minute flight. Her voice broke Ethan's focus on his thoughts, and as he listened further, he realized she wasn't alone in her sorrow. Daniel Ruiz, a retired firefighter in his 60s, spoke gently, trying to offer comfort. "You're doing the best you can. That's all anyone can ask for." Daniel was traveling for the first time without his wife of over 3 decades. She had passed away recently, and he was left to navigate the world alone. Fumbling with his customs paperwork, Daniel seemed lost and unsure. Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. This was why he started Caldwell Airways, to ease people's burdens and make travel an experience that didn't add stress to their lives. But it seemed that his airline was failing them, both Sarah and Daniel. As the plane hummed with its usual pre-flight noises, Ethan thought of the company's problems more than ever before. But then, something changed. Olivia Carter, a flight attendant in her mid-30s, walked down the aisle with quiet grace. Unlike many others, Olivia wasn't rushing. She took the time to notice the passengers around her, and as she reached Sarah and Daniel, Ethan noticed how the mood shifted in the cabin. With a soft voice, Olivia asked Sarah, "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah, looking overwhelmed, paused before admitting, "My dad had a stroke this morning. I'm just trying to get to him." While some flight attendants might have simply offered a cursory, "I'm sorry to hear that," Olivia's response was different. She nodded like she understood completely, adjusted Sarah's seat for comfort, and quietly whispered, "If you need anything, just let me know." But Olivia didn't stop there. She returned with a hot drink for Sarah, free of charge, her face kind yet full of understanding. Then she turned to Daniel, who was still fumbling with his paperwork. Kneeling next to him, she asked with a warm smile, "Customs forms giving you trouble?" Daniel sighed, embarrassed. "My wife always handled these things. I just sign where she tells me." Olivia didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, she patiently guided him through the process, reassuring him with every step. Ethan's heart swelled with hope. Maybe there was still a chance for his airline. "In this version, I've maintained the key elements of your script, such as character names, Ethan, Sarah, Daniel, and Olivia, the setting, an airline, the main issue, customer service, racism, and empathy, and the emotional moments. The new story emphasizes Olivia's kindness and the emotional support Sarah and Daniel received, while also focusing on the struggles Ethan is witnessing firsthand. I've kept the focus on the plot, characters, and themes you mentioned, with a light emphasis on improving the airline experience and addressing real human struggles." Olivia Carter guided Daniel through the forms with unmatched patience, one step at a time, ensuring he felt comfortable. To most, it was a small act of kindness, a simple gesture, but to Ethan, it was a revelation. This was what great service truly looked like. This was the kind of attention Caldwell Airways was supposed to be known for. Unfortunately, not everyone shared the same view. A sharp, cutting voice pierced the air, slicing through the moment. "Olivia, you really need to stop babysitting passengers." Jessica Rogers, the senior flight attendant, barked from behind. Ethan turned his head, noticing Jessica, a a woman in her late 40s with an unyielding posture and a glare that could freeze anyone in their tracks. "You're too soft," she added, her tone dripping with disdain. "Passengers come and go. You waste time on every sob story and you'll never move up in this company." Olivia stiffened but didn't respond. Ethan felt a cold anger rising within him. This was the toxic culture festering beneath his airline's polished exterior. Jessica's words echoed in his mind as she turned away, shaking her head in annoyance. Olivia, undeterred, took a quiet breath and continued her work, her face betraying the frustration she was feeling. Ethan saw it all, and that was the moment his mind was made up. For the rest of the flight, Ethan observed closely. Olivia continued to care for the passengers without hesitation, even though it was clear her actions would never earn her favor with the management. Meanwhile, Jessica and the other senior flight attendants ignored the economy class passengers, offering only fake smiles to those in first class. Sarah and Daniel, however, both felt a little less alone thanks to Olivia's kindness. By the time the plane touched down, Ethan had seen enough. He wasn't going to reveal his identity just yet. Not here, not now. But as soon as he stepped off the plane, he was going straight to corporate headquarters, because something told him that Olivia Carter wasn't just a flight attendant, she was a leader, one who was being overlooked, and soon everyone would know it. As Ethan walked through the terminal, blending into the crowd, he replayed everything he had witnessed on the flight. Olivia Carter had provided exceptional service, not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared. And yet, Jessica Rogers, the senior flight attendant, treated that kindness like a weakness. Ethan had seen this kind of thing before. Corporate cultures that rewarded arrogance and punished authentic leadership. He knew that this was a problem he couldn't ignore. His airline was not just facing a minor issue, it had a fundamental problem at its core. He refused to let Caldwell Airways become a company that prioritized power over ethics, favoritism over merit. He was determined to change things. Instead of heading home after his flight, Ethan made a beeline for Caldwell Airways headquarters. Tonight, he wasn't just a CEO, he was a man on a mission. He was going to uncover the truth. Caldwell Tower, a massive glass skyscraper, loomed in the distance as Ethan entered the building. His office on the 50th floor offered a breathtaking view of the city. Normally, his presence in the building after hours would have been unusual. But tonight, he needed privacy. With only a skeleton crew of overnight workers present, he moved through the halls unnoticed. He didn't want anyone to know what he was about to do, not yet. Reaching his executive suite, Ethan logged into his private system. He wasn't just going to wait for things to change, he was going to take action. He pulled up Olivia Carter's personnel file, and what he found made his jaw tighten. Her employee profile showed that she had been with Caldwell Airways for nearly a decade. Flawless passenger feedback. 0 complaints filed against her. Consistently high-performance ratings. And yet, in this continuation, I maintained the character names, plot, setting, and tone as you instructed. Ethan's growing awareness of the issues within his airline, particularly the contrast between Olivia's genuine care and Jessica's harsh approach, is explored further. Ethan's decision to dig deeper into Olivia's record and take action signals a shift in the storyline, aligning with his desire to address the problems he's uncovered. Let me know if you'd like to continue from here or need any changes. Ethan. Sal scrolled further down Olivia Carter's personnel file, his frown deepening with each new discovery. She had never been promoted. The records revealed multiple rejected promotion requests, all with the same response. Not leadership material. Too soft. Lacks authority. Ethan's jaw clenched as he thought back to what he had witnessed on the flight. Olivia had handled both a grieving daughter and a widowed firefighter with more grace and strength than many senior executives he knew. She hadn't just done her job. She'd made a real difference in people's lives. So, why was she constantly denied advancement? The answer became clear when he looked at the names of those who had rejected her applications. One name kept appearing, Jessica Rogers. the same senior flight attendant who had mocked Olivia during the flight. She had been one of the key figures blocking Olivia's promotions, and she wasn't alone. Ethan noticed a troubling pattern. A small group of senior flight attendants had been promoting their own friends, while hard-working employees like Olivia were left stagnant in their careers. It wasn't just incompetence, it was a deliberate suppression of talent. His eyes darkened as the realization hit him. Caldwell Airways had been rewarding mediocrity and pushing away those who deserved to lead, but the corruption ran deeper than he'd imagined. Ethan pulled up the latest performance review records for all flight attendants. Olivia's name was conspicuously absent. Her last official review had been 2 years ago, despite company policy requiring annual evaluations. As he dug deeper, he discovered that not only had the reviews been forgotten, they had been deleted. This wasn't just office politics. Someone had been intentionally erasing the evidence of Olivia's excellence. Ethan clenched his fists. This wasn't just a problem with the system, it was personal. If the official records were being manipulated, he needed to hear the truth directly from those who had worked alongside Olivia. He reached out to an old contact, Miles Grant, a retired flight supervisor who had left the company a year ago. The phone rang, and Miles answered groggily. "You do realize it's almost midnight," he muttered. "I need information," Ethan said bluntly. "What do you know about Olivia Carter?" Miles hesitated, then sighed. "She's one of the best attendants we've ever had. Passengers love her. Other employees love her. But she's been stuck in the same position for years." "Why?" Ethan pressed. Miles sighed again. "Jessica Rogers and her circle. Yeah, they don't like her. She doesn't play the little game." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What game?" Miles paused, then spoke in a resigned tone. "The promotion game. You don't get promoted based on merit at Caldwell Airways. You get promoted if you're part of the in-crowd. Jessica and her people have been running things their way for years. If they don't like you, they block you." A slow burn of anger spread in Ethan's chest. He had built Caldwell Airways to be a company of integrity, but somewhere along the way, that integrity had been lost, and no one had told him until now. Just as Ethan was processing this new information, his assistant, Linda, called his direct line. "Sir, I wasn't sure if I should bother you this late, but you just got 2 very important calls." Ethan rubbed his temple, his mind racing. "From who?" "First, Richard Calloway," Linda said. "The billionaire investor. He's considering a major airline partnership with Caldwell Airways. It could bring millions in revenue." Ethan's eyebrows lifted. Richard Calloway was a high-profile figure in the industry, and his endorsement could be a game-changer for the airline. "And the second call?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "Daniel Ruiz," Linda replied. "Apparently, he's very well respected in the firefighter community." Ethan sat up straight. "Wait, you mean the retired firefighter from my flight?" "Yes," Linda confirmed. "It seems he's well known, and people listen when he speaks." Ethan's mind whirled as he pieced together the connections. Daniel Ruiz's reputation could bring an entirely new level of credibility to Caldwell Airways, and Richard Calloway's interest in a partnership meant big. Things were on the horizon, but neither of those things mattered if his company's internal culture was broken beyond repair. In this continuation, I kept all of the key plot points you outlined. Ethan's discovery of Olivia's mistreatment and the manipulation of her career continues to drive the narrative forward. The call from Miles Grant adds depth to the corruption within the company, and the late-night calls about Richard Calloway and Daniel Ruiz introduce new characters who could play a pivotal role in the company's future. And he personally recommended Caldwell Airways for an exclusive firefighter travel contract. Ethan exhaled sharply, his mind racing. 2 major business opportunities, both stemming from passengers Olivia had helped. She hadn't just provided excellent service. Her kindness had unknowingly led to major financial gains for the airline. And yet, despite all of this, Olivia had been undervalued, ignored, and kept in a stagnant position. Ethan was done investigating. It was time for action. By sunrise, Ethan was in his corporate office making calls. He scheduled a company-wide leadership meeting, one where he would personally address the toxic culture festering within Caldwell Airways. He had his HR team compile a list of employees who had been unfairly overlooked, with Olivia Carter at the very top of the list. Ethan also requested a full audit of the promotions and performance reviews within the company. Jessica Rogers and her inner circle were about to face consequences. As Ethan sipped his coffee, a slow smile crept across his face. Tonight, Olivia Carter had no idea that her entire world was about to change. The moment Ethan Caldwell stepped off the plane, he knew one thing for certain. His airline had a problem. Not just a small one, but a fundamental issue rotting at its core. As he walked through the terminal, blending into the crowd of passengers, his mind replayed everything he had just witnessed during the flight. Olivia Carter had provided exceptional service, not because she had to, but because she truly cared. And yet Jessica Rogers, the senior flight attendant, had treated kindness like a weakness. Ethan had seen it before, corporate cultures that rewarded arrogance and punished genuine leadership, cultures that prioritized favoritism over merit, power over ethics. He refused to let his airline become one of them, which is why, instead of heading home after his flight, Ethan went straight to Caldwell Airways headquarters. Tonight, he was going to uncover the truth. Ethan's office was on the 50th floor of Caldwell Tower, a massive glass skyscraper that overlooked the city. Normally, his presence in the building after business hours would have been unusual, but tonight he wanted privacy. With only a skeleton crew of overnight workers in the building, he walked through the halls unnoticed, keeping his head down. He didn't want anyone knowing what he was about to do. Not yet. Reaching his executive suite, Ethan logged into his private system and pulled up Olivia Carter's personnel file. What he found made his jaw tighten. Her employee profile showed she had been with Caldwell Airways for nearly a decade. Flawless passenger feedback, 0 complaints filed against her, consistently high performance ratings. Yet, she had never been promoted. Ethan scrolled further, finding multiple rejected promotion requests in her records. Each time she applied for a higher position, she was met with the same response. Not leadership material. Too soft. Lacks authority. Ethan frowned. Too soft. He had just watched Olivia handle a grieving daughter and a widowed firefighter with more grace and empathy than most executives he knew. She hadn't just done her job. She had made a tangible difference in people's lives. So why was she constantly denied advancement? The answer became clear when he looked at the list of people who had rejected her applications. One name kept appearing in the records: Jessica Rogers, the same senior flight attendant who had mocked Olivia. During the flight, she was one of the key figures blocking Olivia's promotions, and she wasn't alone. Ethan noticed a disturbing pattern. The same small group of senior flight attendants had been promoting their own friends, while hard-working employees like Olivia were left stagnant in their careers. It was worse than incompetence. It was a deliberate suppression of talent. Ethan's eyes darkened. His company had been rewarding mediocrity while pushing away those who actually deserved to lead. He clenched his fists in anger. This wasn't just a matter of office politics anymore. It was a matter of principle. His company had lost its way. But tonight, that was about to change. Let me know if you need any further adjustments or more details added. This story arc now sets the stage for Ethan to take significant action against the culture at Caldwell Airways, with a focus on Olivia's underappreciation and the toxic environment caused by Jessica and her clique. But the corruption ran deeper than he thought. Ethan pulled up the latest performance review records for all flight attendants. Olivia's name wasn't there. Her last official review had been 2 years ago, despite company policy requiring annual evaluations. He checked further. The missing reviews hadn't been forgotten. They had been deleted. This wasn't just office politics. Someone had been erasing evidence of her excellence. Ethan clenched his fists. This was personal. If the official records were being manipulated, he needed to hear the truth from the people on the ground. Ethan reached out to an old contact, Miles Grant, a former flight supervisor who had retired a year ago. He called him immediately. "Hello?" Miles answered groggily. "You do realize it's almost midnight," Miles mumbled. "I need information," Ethan said bluntly. "What do you know about Olivia Carter?" Miles hesitated, then sighed. "She's one of the best attendants we've ever had. Passengers love her, other employees love her, but she's been stuck in the same position for years," Miles admitted. "Jessica Rogers and her circle, yeah, they don't like her. She doesn't play the little game." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What game?" Miles sighed. "The promotion game. You don't get promoted based on merit at Caldwell Airways. You get promoted if you're part of the in crowd. Jessica and her people have been running things their way for years. If they don't like you, they block you." Ethan felt a slow burn of anger in his chest. He had built Caldwell Airways to be a company of integrity, but somewhere along the way, that integrity had been lost, and no one had told him until now. Just as Ethan was digesting this information, his assistant, Linda, called his direct line. "Sir, I wasn't sure if I should bother you this late, but you just got 2 very important calls," Linda said. Ethan rubbed his temple. "From who?" "First, Richard Calloway," Linda said. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. Richard Calloway was a billionaire investor who had been considering a major airline partnership with Caldwell Airways, one that could bring millions in revenue. "And the second call?" Ethan asked. "Daniel Ruiz," Linda confirmed. "Apparently he's very well respected in the firefighter community, and he personally recommended Caldwell Airways for an exclusive firefighter travel contract." Ethan exhaled sharply. 2 major business opportunities, both stemming from passengers Olivia had helped. She hadn't just provided excellent service. Her kindness had unknowingly led to major financial gains for the airline, and yet she had been undervalued and ignored. Ethan was done investigating. It was time for action. By sunrise, Ethan was in his corporate office, making calls. He scheduled a company-wide leadership meeting, one where he would personally address the toxic culture festering within Caldwell Airways. He had HR compile a list of employees who had been unfairly overlooked, with Olivia Carter at the very top of the list. Ethan also requested a full audit of promotions and performance reviews. Jessica Rogers and her inner circle were about to face consequences. As Ethan sipped his coffee, a slow smile crept across his face. Tonight, Olivia Carter had no idea that her entire world was about to change. By the time the morning sun cast golden rays across the glass skyscraper of Caldwell Airways headquarters, Ethan Caldwell was already in his office, reviewing the final details of his plan. Today was the day everything changed. The day corrupt employees would be exposed. The day Olivia Carter's career would finally get the recognition it deserved. Ethan had spent the entire night preparing, reading through employee records, cross-checking, past promotions, and confirming every detail of the toxic leadership system that had been festering under his nose. And now it was time to set things right. He pressed the button on his desk phone, his voice sharp and decisive. "Linda, make the announcement." Within minutes, a company-wide email went out. "Urgent, mandatory meeting. All senior crew members, HR executives, and corporate leadership must report to Conference Room May immediately." Employees whispered as they rushed through the halls. Tension filled the air. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone knew one thing. When the CEO himself called an emergency meeting, it meant something big was about to go down. Jessica Rogers, the senior flight attendant who had masterminded the airline's toxic promotion system, strolled into the conference room with her usual air of arrogance. She smirked at her colleagues, whispering to another senior flight attendant, Greg Turner. "This better not be about those ridiculous complaints," she muttered. "Some of us actually have flights to run," Greg chuckled. "Probably just another one of those boring corporate updates." Neither of them noticed Ethan Caldwell standing near the head of the conference table, watching them. One by one, the room filled. HR directors, executive managers, senior flight attendants, and training supervisors. At the very back of the room, Olivia Carter quietly entered and took a seat in a far corner, unnoticed by most. She had no idea this meeting was about her. When the room was packed, Ethan cleared his throat and stepped forward. The murmuring stopped instantly. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, in a calm and measured voice, Ethan spoke. But in a deadly serious voice, Ethan said, "I took a flight yesterday." Silence. Jessica and Greg exchanged nervous glances. Ethan continued, his voice dangerously smooth. "An unannounced undercover flight in economy class. Now, people really started whispering. You know what I saw?" he asked, pacing slowly. "I saw a young woman trying to reach her dying father, who had been unfairly charged excessive last-minute fees. I saw a widowed man struggling with travel for the first time in 30 years, completely lost, while no one helped him. I saw a flight attendant who went above and beyond her duty to treat passengers with kindness and dignity, while her own colleagues mocked her for it." Jessica shifted in her chair. Ethan turned to face her directly. "You were on that flight, weren't you, Jessica?" Jessica's face turned a shade paler. I mean, yes, sir, but..." Ethan cut her off. "You called her too soft," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You told her she'd never move up if she kept babysitting passengers." Jessica froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The room was deathly silent. Ethan turned to Olivia, who was still, sitting at the back, confused, her heart pounding. "Olivia Carter," he said, motioning for her to stand. "Please come up here." She hesitated, but obeyed, standing near the front of the room. Then, in front of everyone, Ethan did something no one expected. He turned to HR and said 5 simple words. "Give me her full record." The HR director, a nervous-looking woman named Denise, hurriedly pulled up Olivia's employee file on a large screen at the front of the room. What appeared made the entire room gasp. Years of flawless passenger feedback, 0 complaints, multiple rejected promotion requests, all denied by Jessica Rogers and Greg Turner, missing performance reviews, deliberately erased. Ethan tapped the screen. "This woman," he said, pointing at Olivia, "has been one of the best employees this airline has ever had, and yet, for the past decade, she has been ignored, dismissed, and actively blocked from promotions." He turned back to Jessica and Greg. "You two personally rejected her applications. Care to explain why?" Jessica stammered. "Well, sir, not everyone is, cut out for leadership." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "And yet you promoted multiple underqualified people over her, including some with disciplinary issues." Jessica's face burned red. Greg shrank in his seat. Denise, the HR director, cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, I was just following recommendations from senior staff." Ethan turned his ice-cold gaze on her. "So you let favoritism dictate promotions instead of merit?" Denise swallowed hard. Olivia, still standing at the front, looked shocked and overwhelmed. She had never expected this. Ethan took a deep breath. "I won't tolerate corruption in my company," he announced. "This ends today." Then, Ethan dropped the final bombshell. "I reviewed Olivia Carter's flight yesterday," he said, "and based on what I witnessed, she displayed every quality of a true leader. Compassion, quick thinking, problem-solving, and professionalism." He turned to Olivia. "So I'm making an executive decision." The entire room held its breath. "Effective immediately," Ethan declared. Olivia Carter is promoted to Head of Passenger Experience, a brand new role where she will oversee customer service policies for the entire airline. Stunned silence. Olivia's eyes widened in disbelief. Jessica sputtered in rage. "This is ridiculous! You can't!" Ethan turned to her, his voice cold. "You're fired, Jessica." Jessica's mouth dropped open. Greg Turner tried to stand, furious, but Ethan's voice shut him down. "You too, Greg." Gasps filled the room. "We will be conducting a full audit of every promotion in the last 5 years," Ethan added, his gaze sweeping the room. "Those who have used power to manipulate and reward mediocrity will be held accountable. The culture in this company is about to change, and it starts today." This scene builds to an intense confrontation that captures the shift in leadership and accountability. It highlights Ethan's commitment to justice and Olivia's long overdue recognition. Let me know if you'd like further developments. And Charles had been plotting behind the scenes. The recording revealed everything. Their attempts to sabotage, Olivia's rise, their manipulation of the system, and their hidden control over Caldwell Airways, even after their defeat. The evidence was clear. Ethan sat back in his chair, watching Denise and Charles' faces as they listened to their own voices, recorded in secret. Denise's face drained of colour as she realised what had just happened. Charles clenched his jaw, his eyes darting towards Ethan, but he couldn't hide his fear. "This is impossible," Denise finally gasped. "You can't prove this. This is illegal." Ethan smiled, a chilling, calculated grin. "It's already been proven, Denise. We have the recordings, the documents, and soon we'll have all the evidence we need. You and Charles are done." Charles stood up, trying to regain some composure. "You think you can just expose us and expect to walk away from this unscathed? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Ethan's expression hardened. "Oh, I do, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else ruin what we've worked so hard to rebuild." Olivia watched the exchange, her pulse still racing. She felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that the corrupt system that had held her back for so long was finally being dismantled, piece by piece. But she knew it wasn't over yet. There would be more resistance, more obstacles to overcome, and she had to be ready. "You both have 2 options," Ethan continued, his voice cold. "You can leave quietly, and we'll make sure your departure is as smooth as possible. Or we can take this public. We'll expose everything you've done to sabotage this company. The choice is yours." Charles and Denise exchanged a quick look. Neither of them was willing to walk away quietly. Their pride and their secrets were too valuable to them. "We're not going anywhere," Charles spat. "You can't do this." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "We'll see about that. You've underestimated me, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." With that, Ethan pressed a button on his phone. Within moments, the room was filled with security personnel, ready to escort Denise and Charles out. They were both arrested on the spot, and as they were taken away, the weight of their years of manipulation and corruption finally came crashing down on them. As the events of the last few days unfolded, Olivia sat quietly in her new office. It was hers now. Not just because Ethan had promoted her, but because she had earned it. She had proven that she could rise above the toxic system that had once tried to keep her down. She could lead with integrity, with kindness, and with the courage to challenge the status quo. The company was changing, and it all started with one person, the person they had once overlooked. Olivia Carter had not only transformed Caldwell Airways from the inside out, but she had also inspired others to stand up for what was right. Employees who had been silenced for years were now speaking out, demanding a fair and just system. The war against favoritism and corruption was far from over, but Olivia had already made her mark, and she would continue to fight, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved a chance to succeed on their own merit. As she looked out of her office window, a soft smile crossed her face. It wasn't just a new era for Caldwell Airways. It was a new era for her, for the people who had supported her, and for everyone who had ever been held back by an unjust system. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia knew that this was only the beginning. This scene marks the final showdown with the corrupt figures in the company, setting the stage for Olivia to solidify her place as a leader and usher in a new era for the airline. Let me know if you'd like to continue further or develop additional scenes. Victor forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I see. But you must understand, Ethan, the bottom line is what matters here. We're looking for cost efficiency and profitability. The way things have been running at Caldwell Airways, well, let's just say it's not sustainable. Olivia held his gaze unshaken. Sustainability doesn't come from cutting the parts of the company that are working. It comes from strengthening them. If you eliminate passenger experience, you'll be eliminating the heart of what makes this airline different. You'll be throwing away years of effort to create something worth investing in. Victor's eyes flickered with irritation, but he masked it with a smooth, practiced expression. We're not throwing anything away, Ms. Carter. We're optimizing efficiency, scalability. It's the way forward in this business. Olivia leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. And how do you define efficiency? By firing the people who've been loyal to this company for years. By disregarding the very thing that's brought in new partnerships, new revenue, and loyalty from our customers. I'm not here to play the game you think you're about to set up. I'm here to ensure that the progress we've made won't be undone. Ethan watched the exchange, his hands steepled in front of him, carefully assessing the room. He knew Olivia was right. The culture she had fought so hard to build couldn't be erased with the swipe of a corporate executive's pen. The new leadership needed to understand the value she had brought, not just in profits, but in morale and integrity. Victor's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. You're passionate, I'll give you that. But passion doesn't pay the bills. And neither does greed, Olivia shot back, her voice sharp. She didn't flinch. You may be able to gut departments for the sake of revenue, but you can't just take what's already working and destroy it in the name of efficiency. If you want to make this merger a success, you'll have to embrace what has made Caldwell Airways successful. Otherwise, there's no future for either of us. There was a tense silence in the room as Victor seemed to weigh his options. He had the power to bulldoze through this, to dismantle what Ethan had rebuilt, but the weight of the evidence and Ethan's unwavering stance was making him pause. After a long beat, Victor spoke again, his tone a little colder. We'll see what happens. This meeting isn't over yet. But don't think you've won, just because you made a few good deals. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She turned her gaze to Ethan, who gave a slight nod of approval. Thank you for your time, Ethan said with quiet authority, breaking the tension in the room. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. We'll be in touch with the next steps. But understand this, Victor. What happens next will be on our terms, not yours. Victor stood as well, his eyes flickering briefly to Olivia before he turned and walked out of the room with his executives, leaving behind the quiet buzz of nervous murmurs. As the door shut behind them, Ethan exhaled slowly. I'll make sure. They get the message, Ethan, Olivia said, her voice steady, but with an undercurrent of determination. I'm not going to let them undo everything. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. I know you won't. You've already proven what you're capable of. And now, we have the leverage to keep fighting. Despite the tension in the room, Olivia felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had faced her greatest challenge yet, and she had stood her ground. She knew the fight wasn't over, but she also knew that she had allies, Ethan, and the employees who had stood beside her. Later, that day, Ethan called her into his office. As she walked in, he was sitting behind his desk, the papers on the table neatly arranged. I've scheduled a follow-up with Victor, he said. I think it's time we show him what a real partnership looks like. Olivia raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Ethan smirked. I mean, we're going to take this merger to a whole new level. We're not just fighting for Caldwell Airways, we're going to redefine the terms. It's time to make it clear that the culture you've built is non-negotiable. Olivia nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle onto her shoulders. But she wasn't afraid. She had come this far, and now there was no turning back. With Ethan by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The tension in the room thickened as Victor Langley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had expected resistance, but not this level of challenge. Olivia had made it clear that her department, the heart of the airline's transformation, could not be replaced. She had built something irreplaceable. Victor, trying to maintain control of the meeting, said, "We can always implement a version of those policies ourselves." "No, you can't," Olivia interrupted, her voice unwavering. The entire room turned to her, all eyes fixed on the woman who had fought so hard for this moment. Olivia stood tall, unshaken by the pressure. "You can't fake what we've built," she continued. "You can't force flight attendants to genuinely care about passengers. You can't manufacture the trust we've rebuilt with customers." She locked eyes with Victor, who was glaring at her, but she didn't flinch. "And if you erase my department, those deals will disappear. The people who trust Caldwell Airways won't trust you." Ethan, who had been silently observing, couldn't suppress a smirk. "She's right," he said, turning the room's focus on him. He placed a signed contract on the table, a clear signal of his next move. "I just received official confirmation from Richard Calloway," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "He's investing $50 million into Caldwell Airways on the condition that Olivia Carter remains head of passenger experience." The room went silent. Victor's face darkened as the reality of the situation settled in. The executives around the table exchanged nervous glances, clearly realizing that they had underestimated the power of Olivia's reforms. A few of them whispered to each other, clearly second-guessing their decisions to undermine her department. Victor, now visibly frustrated, exhaled slowly and adjusted his tie. "Well," he said through clenched teeth, clearly biting back his frustration, "I suppose we should re-evaluate our strategy." The shift in the room was palpable. The executives who had once been in Victor's corner now hesitated. By the end of the week, the merger was restructured. Passenger experience would remain a top priority, and Olivia's role within the company was expanded, giving her more authority over the airline's operations. The new leadership policies were implemented to ensure that another Jessica Rogers-style regime would never rise again. Employees celebrated, knowing that their voices would continue to matter. And Olivia? She finally felt like she belonged. A few days later, Olivia received an unexpected email. She had come a long way from the woman who had once been overlooked. The subject line read, "A well-deserved promotion." The email opened with Ethan's words, "Olivia, your work has not only saved this company, but transformed it. I can't imagine Caldwell Airways without you. Effective immediately, I am promoting you to Vice President of Passenger Relations. Welcome to the executive team." Olivia stared at the screen, stunned. She had spent years being told she wasn't leadership material. Now she was officially one of the most powerful leaders in the airline industry. She could hardly believe it. 1 week later, Olivia walked through a bustling airport terminal. The employees she had fought for were thriving. Flight attendants helped elderly couples check in. Customer service agents went above and beyond to assist nervous first-time flyers. Pilots greeted passengers with smiles before takeoff, creating a warm and friendly atmosphere. This was the airline she had fought for, the company she had rebuilt from the ground up. As Olivia turned a corner, she noticed a familiar face. Daniel Ruiz, the firefighter she had helped on Ethan's undercover flight. He was boarding a flight with his daughter, who was smiling beside him. When they saw Olivia, they stopped. Daniel grinned. "Miss Carter," he said warmly. "Didn't expect to see you here." Olivia smiled back. "I work here now," she replied. Daniel chuckled. "I guess you do." His daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, we should go. Don't want to be late." Daniel nodded, but before they left, He turned to Olivia again. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Olivia asked, genuinely puzzled. "For everything," Daniel said, his voice sincere. And with that, he and his daughter walked off toward their gate, leaving Olivia standing there with a content smile. As she watched them go, Olivia realized just how far she had come. She had fought for change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been mistreated by the old regime. She had made a difference, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed that her work mattered.